Oh, Jesus here. Yay. I'm going to just turn off the waiting room. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here for Trauma Training Tuesday on this, at least in Worcester, Massachusetts, squelching hot day in June. Like the day is enough of a setup. It's a hot one out here. I got that little heat warning on my computer even. Hi, Teresa. And I'm always delighted month after month that people tune in for 2 hours in the middle of the week to like hear about trauma. What an amazing group of people. It like makes my heart burst to think that people are willing to hear about the dark things in Bill. Oh my God, I'm in like love fest zone. People are like willing to be in the dark with people. Because that's also about, like Kelsey reminds us, the joy. I feel like our capacity for joy and our capacity for darkness are the same, right? That's the whole thing. And if we're not willing to go there with the bad, hard, challenging life experiences, we're also not, hi Jenna, we're also not going to get the joy and the beauty and the like, right, our whole range of human experiences. So the fact that people are willing to look at the really hard human experiences and have empathy for that is so beautiful to me. It's so heartwarming that in this hard world, people are willing to be there with other people. And there's not many harder experiences that I can imagine than the trauma of immigration. I feel truly blessed that it is not something I have personal lived experience with. And I feel like for so many Americans, we get to take for granted that we haven't been faced with the dilemma of leaving behind everything we know, everything we hold dear, everything familiar, because it's so dangerous or so hard to keep going, or the reasons people leave everything they've known are horrific. Only threat of not continuing to live would get you to leave what you've always known. We know that in all sort of trauma spaces, that what it takes to get you to leave the familiar is extreme, right? Our human pull to stay with what we know is huge. That's like what it is to be human, is to stay with what's familiar. So for people to leave what they know, everything they know behind, and that right there says something huge about what they've already faced, just that decision to leave. That, if that weren't enough, what they face when they make that journey, like every other trauma, it's just the first domino that like leads to the next thing, and then the next bad thing, and the next bad thing, and the next bad thing, and the next bad thing. And really the whole intent of starting Trauma Training Tuesday was the environment, right? Like when you are the person in the domino effect, if the people around you recognize that and do what they can to cushion that blow and give you empathy and try to help with those barriers, that means the world. That is like everything. That is the only place where we can help, really, is if we recognize the harm that's happening to people and do what we can to cushion the blow. That to me is like the price of admission for life. Like that's life worth living, when you can help in that space. And if there was ever someone setting an amazing example of being in that space, it is my friend Jillian Phillips. LICSW, Amazing Social Worker, Office of New Americans. Jillian, I was telling her before people came on that I was having some problems with my Facebook advertising this cycle around. And so to compensate for that, I was just trying to tell everybody I came in contact with that Jillian was doing our Trauma Training Tuesday this month. And in doing that, I did actually get out in the world of Worcester this month, and I saw Trish in real life, Troy in real life. That was exciting. And like everywhere I went and I brought up Jillian's name, she's like a Worcester saint. They were like, oh my gosh, she is amazing. She's a goddess. She's doing so much good work. And that's super cool, right? Like, and you know, Jillian won't receive all that. But you know, that's to be expected. That's who she is. She's doing it for the love, not for the accolades. Susan. And it is rewarding work. It is amazing to know that you are helping people. When you're helping people in their darkest moments, you feel that, like, you know that it's important and that it's helpful. But also the recognition in the community of like how hard this space is right now. There are so many people. This is the most hurting group of people I can even imagine. And resources keep getting cut. Like the baseline of citizenry does not have the resources that they need. And now, like, we're trying to like squeeze resources where it's just not there. It is myth of scarcity, but these are bigger issues, right? Like, we know that this is much bigger social problems. We have more than enough to go around for everyone. That's not the problem. The problem is it is being hoarded at the top. But in the here and now, that's nothing Jillian can fix. And she's trying to find resources for people that don't even have roofs over their heads. And she's going to the people that are barely keeping a roof over their head in her ask. So that's why, Jillian, everyone in Worcester thinks you're a saint. And I know that you also have invited some people that you're working with. And so I guess I'm just gonna turn it on over to you, and you can, you know, kind of call out or shout out anyone that wants to say anything else. Maybe Trish does. And I can see our audience is, of course, full of lovely people that, you know, also have contributions to make about this population. But however it goes, I will leave it to you. I'll zip it.
Thanks so much, Amy. Just checking that you can hear me, because that was a challenge at the beginning. Great. And also, I am using a different presenting tool this time. I'm using Canva, so fingers crossed that it goes smoothly. So yes, thank you so much for having me. I have been the New Americans coordinator here for the city of Worcester since October of last year. But anyone who has known me prior to that knows that this is a topic that has been really near and dear to my heart for quite a while. I think we all who are social workers go into this because we want to support people during the times that they need it the most. And that tends to be an area where I find myself feeling the most fulfilled professionally, but also personally, is helping those who are otherwise really unable to help themselves. And it's to give them the tools that they need to, you know, take those next steps themselves, not giving them handouts, but giving them hand ups. And so I really lean into that. I don't know everything. There's no way anyone could know everything. So I'm very thankful to have other folks here like Trish and Amy Mitchell who are able to help fill in any gaps that might show up during this presentation. Please feel free to add any questions you have in the chat. There will be some parts of this training where it's more interactive. So I really do welcome folks in to that. And if there are parts of it, which there is likely to be, that feel too difficult for you, please do take care of yourselves first, and feel free to shut off your video, take a step away, turn down the volume, whatever you need to do. Acknowledging that bearing witness to other people's pain is always a struggle, and you can't help others unless you're helping yourself. So do what you need to do during this to help, but I would not be doing the topic the service it deserves without including some of those pieces. So without further ado, I'm going to attempt to so sorry. Okay. Okay. Is everyone able to see my screen? Great.
I
So
can see your screen, but it's in, it has a couple different windows.
Is
It
it
has
in
like
view?
audience window, enter full screen. It looks like it's going to be beautiful.
It says that my screen share is paused, which is all right. Hang on, let me try that again. So I also realized that I need to do this. Any better, or are you still seeing weirdness?
Now it just says that you have started screen sharing,
But then it's paused. Oh
but
my
it
goodness.
does not have the screen shared, at least for me.
You have to select your PowerPoint again, I think, or your Canva.
It does look like it's going to be beautiful. Your pictures look great. And while you're trying to do that, while you're doing that, Susan, I really appreciate your chat comment about being vilified for wanting to live. That is like, I didn't say that when I was introducing Jillian, but I put that in the promo for this training. New arrivals to our country, new immigrants are like our number one social scapegoat all the time. Like whatever is going wrong in our country, we're like, it's them. It's these, they're stealing our jobs, they're taking our welfare, they're this, they're that. And it's honestly ridiculous. And it's so, it's inaccurate. It's not true. It really just adds insult to injury. And yeah, you put it so well, being vilified for wanting to live. Wow. Jillian wanted to do this topic, and I feel like, and the last time we also did trauma related to immigration status, the legal aspects of it, by attorney Alex Moradian. So if you haven't seen that, it is recorded on our website, worcesteracts.org. And he did all the pieces around the law. So that's really important if you're working with this population. But both times they reached out to me wanting to cover this topic because this population is so vilified. And it just continues to harm them. It's needless. No reason for it. Anything we can do, Jillian?
Let me try one more time. Okay. It's giving me weird. It's like, drag this here.
Oh, okay. It looks good now. It looks perfect.
Looks good now. Okay.
Yeah, right. Everybody else got it? Yep, you got it. Yay.
Okay.
Now I'll zip it.
Again, tried the Canva thing. Okay. So again, today the topic is the trauma of immigration. And I thought I was looking at different things as I was preparing this, and one of sort of the taglines that caught me was this idea of sort of chasing the American dream, that people come here thinking that things are going to be so much better once they just get on American soil. And unfortunately, that isn't always accurate. For some folks, I think it might be more accurate than for other folks, which is part of what we'll go through today. Just making sure we're still seeing this. We're seeing the agenda. Super cute little baby. Great. So we're going to do a little bit of an overview, and then we're going to go through sort of the phases of migration and the different types of trauma that can happen throughout that. We're going to talk sort of explicitly related to trauma in children. We're going to talk about resettlement as trauma. And then we'll go a little bit more into some of the protective factors and strengths, as well as resources that folks on this call can use as next steps. So just for some background, what I know is that we're all coming to this table with different lived experiences. We all come with our different prejudices, political backgrounds, biases, even when we wish we didn't have those. We all have our own histories, experiences, our identities that shape the way we view the world, as well as how we may perceive the information that's going to be shared in this training. We all need to take care of ourselves. We know what's best for us. If you need to take a break, feel supported to do so. Some of the topics will have some videos or other graphics that might be difficult to see or watch. So take care of you first. My goal is to support all of you as we're coming alongside refugees, migrants, and other immigrant communities in a trauma-informed and supportive way. People are not inherently good or bad. They're just human. And that I'm coming to this training with privilege, and that I will use that privilege to speak up for those who need it most. What I don't know about all cultures, all traditions, all preferences or values, the historical information related to each different culture. I continue to try and teach myself, to learn what I can and lean into the experts, which are usually the people with the lived experience, to inform my process. I don't know you as a viewer. I don't know what experiences you have had or lived, how that may impact how you interact with the information that will be shared today. I don't know necessarily what's prompted you to be here today or to be interested in learning about this topic. I don't have all the answers. The information that we'll share, sort of a general guidebook, not a checklist. I'll use the values I do know about social justice, racial equity, and trauma-informed care to guide my work and to guide our discussion today. These are just some overall terms to know that might be helpful as we're having the discussion. So what is status? It's the legal standing of a person and is usually defined by a government or an international program such as the United Nations. Who has refugee status? And that's a person that the UN has determined was forced to flee his or her home because of war, violence, or persecution. This designation is often given to groups from specific countries, and there are more than 20 million people currently that have refugee status across the world. The United States currently resettles about 30,000 refugees per year. As of this information, which you also have to keep in mind that things have changed drastically between, say, the Trump administration and the Biden administration, as well as the recent migrant crisis. So the numbers fluctuate, and we're never really able to get a full and accurate count of things like who is undocumented, because often those are folks that we don't have numbers for. What is an asylum seeker? It's someone who's fled their home and enters another country to apply for asylum. It is legal for them to remain in the United States while an asylum case is pending. So it's important to note that the majority of folks that are here from Haiti are here legally. They are documented. The United States is well aware of their presence in the country, and they are lawfully allowed to be here. They generally are in deportation hearings, but many of them currently have temporary protected status, which is legally allowing them to be lawfully in our country. And then who is undocumented? So that's a person who doesn't have a current legal status. In the United States, this may be people whose status expired, folks who came on a tourist visa or a student visa and then overstayed that visa, as well as those who have entered the country without authorization. This just kind of puts it in a beautiful little photo here, to give you a definition of the difference between a migrant versus an immigrant. Migrants are people who move from one place to another, especially to find work or better living conditions. It may not be permanently. Typically, it's a shorter duration, but it can turn long-term. Usually they're here to improve their economic status. They want better educational resources, or they're escaping things like a natural disaster. Generally, their legal status doesn't change. They often just retain the citizenship of their country of origin. So this could be things like a seasonal farm worker that comes up from Mexico into California to do seasonal work, and then off season they go back to Mexico. This could be students who are studying abroad who would still be from their own country. For instance, if they're from India, but they're here temporarily while they learn, they may then stay, they may get different status, but at the time they'd be considered migrants. Whereas immigrants or refugees are folks who come here permanently with the plan to settle and gain citizenship. They're seeking a new life, to reunify with family, or refuge from a conflict or persecution. This usually includes a legal process to gain residency or citizenship. And that would be people who come here and become permanent residents, they become naturalized citizens, or the refugees that resettlement agencies bring in to resettle. So now we'll talk a little bit about what are some of the traumas that folks go through before they even consider the opportunity of resettling. So that could be that there was abuse and neglect in their family of origin. They could have faced racism in their country that they were living in. They could have experienced a pregnancy loss or death and loss within their family. They could have faced sex or gender discrimination. There could have been immigration issues where they lived, or issues adapting to the culture where they lived, especially if they were from certain religious groups, depending on where they were at. There could have been prolonged life stressors, such as financial stress, homelessness, inability to access education or inability to access healthcare, mental illness within their families, or other violence and brutality in the country of origin. And just a reminder that trauma is a highly impactful and life-threatening event that may trigger a trauma response. So often the folks that are leaving their country, especially as a refugee or migrant to come here, have experienced usually more than one of these. And they may be things that happened only once, or they may be things that were happening over and over again as time went on, causing continuous trauma responses. So these are some images that could be difficult to look at for some of you. So when we're thinking about the trauma that folks are going through, there are certain images that probably come to our minds. These are some of the different pictures of mostly families that are in the middle of traumas. Some, as you can see in this picture here in the corner, this is a Haitian family that is coming up through the Darien Gap. And so they are crossing the rivers. Same as this is a photo of another Haitian family. They're holding on to a rope line so that as they're passing through the water, they don't slip. This is another Haitian family after they had gone through the waters and were now on the shore. So looking at some of the physical trauma that they experienced as they were going through their migration. And then these other photos are from the Middle East, both Syria, Palestine. So just in the chat, if you can add, what are some of the things that come to your mind? especially when you're looking at these children. What do you think they might be feeling? What do you think the parents might be thinking as they're going through this with their children? What are some of the things you think might, in the moment, be their priorities and maybe impacting their current mental health status? So I'm seeing terror, fear, helplessness, lack of control. Lots of fear. Sadness, people facing life or death. Numbness, yeah. So those of us who know a lot about trauma know that there are the different phases, right? There's fight or flight or freeze. And everyone faces it differently. You can see, for instance, in this photo of the family, that there's an adult who looks like he has that numbness or potentially even that confusion. There's a little one here that's clinging to him. There's two little ones here with a lot of sadness or fear. And we're all going to interpret the pictures a little bit differently as well. When I look at this picture, coming from my early intervention background, I think as I'm looking at these toddlers and this infant, what is this experience like for these young children as their minds are developing, as neurons are connecting, as they're living in the middle of this trauma, without access to clean water, without access to food. How is this impacting them long term? This little one here that's, clinging to, I'm going to assume might be a father or an uncle, although you'll hear later that sometimes it's just another person on the path that's offering to help. There's a lot of uncertainty, and what is that doing for the minds of these young children as this is what their day-to-day life is looking like. As adults, when we're experiencing trauma, we can often think back to times when we maybe weren't in that trauma to help us get through that, to help remind us to call on our strengths, call on our coping skills. When we're talking about infants and toddlers and young children who have only known trauma, war zones, they don't have those same skills. And so they're unable to adjust. And when they're with family members who maybe have also always lived in that turmoil, anyone who goes to any of the Together for Kids meetings where Wendy O'Leary always starts us with mindfulness knows that parents need to be well regulated and meeting their own needs in order to continue that regulation for their children and meet their children's needs. So when we're looking at these adults who are also going through the worst traumas of their lives while trying to caregive, we can imagine how that might be impacting relationships with not only their children, but also their partners if they have them, with extended families. Susan, I love that you mentioned shame. There are some really powerful feelings that come with immigration, with migration, with exposure to trauma. Often, it's almost like you go through the stages of grief to some extent. What have I done to cause this experience, especially as a child who doesn't understand the way the world works? There can be this feeling of what have I done and what could I have done differently to avoid this situation, which then leads to some of that ongoing shame. Thank you all for sharing that. So this next piece is looking at the trek that folks take through the Darien Gap, which is, as you'll hear, this space between South America and Central America, that anyone who's coming on foot has to traverse through. And so this is just a couple minutes here. And again, fingers crossed that this will play.
Darien es como una pesadilla que
I just want to check, is everyone seeing this and hearing this? Great.
uno estuviera en la pesadilla con los 1001 demonios. Realmente uno aquí se encuentra con muchas cosas que uno no se imagina, pues, y obstáculos que uno tiene que superar y cosas que uno no creía que las iba a hacer y que iba a pasar por esto. Y mucha gente no las supera.
Y entonces yo soy cocinera, yo trabajaba en Uruguay en un buen restaurante y cerró por el COVID también, ya no tenía vida. Y dije, bueno, tengo que seguir adelantando.
Que es cuando empezamos a entrar a la selva, eran prácticamente como 600 inmigrantes. O sea, un grupo de 600 entre todos, entre haitianos, venezolanos, cubanos, y ahí van saliendo por grupos como de 50, de 60, y van.
Inicialmente con 2 guías que nos colaboraron en el grupo y nos hicieron una avanzada más o menos de unos un día y una noche y un día, hasta un punto que es un río y ya allá le dicen a uno que va a comenzar a tomar la famosa montaña de la muerte.
Está derrumbado por completo. Imagínate que es una loma uniéndose con otra loma. Y lo que lo unía se derrumbó. ¿Y qué quedó? Un filo que es de este ancho así y el peñasco para abajo.
La muchacha se resbaló y cayó por el precipicio y ¡wow! Me dio un dolor en el corazón de no poder hacer nada. Y las demás personas vieron, gritaron, pero siguieron. Seguimos subiendo. Ya de tanto subir la loma, tanto subir la montaña, la gente bota su peso. Bota ropa, comida, bolso, carpa. Y llegamos al río. El sitio más peligroso que yo hice es el río.
Hay un que le dicen, creo que 3 cruces, que fue horrible porque teníamos que cruzar y en el cruce se llevó a 2 haitianas a la otra orilla del río. La arrastró el río y logramos cruzar por otro lado, que era la corriente más bajita, pero era más hondo. Y una vez que cruzamos, que subimos la montaña, que bajamos, me dice mi amigo cubano, ah, eso es una niña. Y pasó una niña, cada vez de una niña haitiana por delante de nosotros. Toda la noche soñando con eso.
La mayor parte de mi recorrido fue con un señor, ya de edad. Él me dijo, él miró hacia más adelante y me dijo, nos van a asaltar.
Pistolas, cuchillos. A una muchacha se la llevaron sola, asustada a ella, el esposo estaba que se paraba.
So some of people want to run. It's me, it's the group. I speak to them. I say, no, I say, everybody cool down. I say, yeah, there is no way to go.
Dejamos 2 días antes de donde me recogió la lancha y estaba en la punta de una loma, dentro de la casa de campaña, ahí esperando y un señor mayor, porque la esposa estaba afuera y decía, por favor, azúcar, alimento, y nosotros le dimos también.
So I know that that's heavy, so I just want to give that a moment. Going through the videos to find the ones that felt like the most appropriate for the topic was heavy, was a lot. wanting to be mindful, and this is something I've talked with Amy a lot, that as we're talking about trauma, we always have to be mindful that we're not re-traumatizing anyone in that process, which is why we're using things like YouTube videos, not folks themselves who've been through this. If someone decided that that felt powerful to them and they wanted to do it, then that, you know, has value, of course. But we want to share information that helps people to understand what's happening without causing trauma. And there's always a fine line of that. But listening to those stories of what people went through, and then knowing the people that I know, many of the Haitian migrants, many folks who are here from Venezuela, that experience that themselves, and to see where they are now, to see the struggles that they went through when they first arrived here last year, really puts a lot of things into perspective in terms of the traumas that they go through, how desperate they were to leave where they were at and come to this place, that they were willing to go through those experiences to get to somewhere they hoped was safer, knowing that there was a chance along the way things would be worse before they were better, if they even got to where it could get better. Just really says a lot about the experiences that people go through. And this piece here is talked about a lot. It's the triple trauma paradigm. So the trauma that you experienced where you were, whether that was war, conflict, discrimination, and then the migration itself as a traumatic event, which we just heard about, how dangerous that journey was, that there was risk of human trafficking, risk of being harmed, being killed, sexual assaults, lots of risks around ongoing safety. Many of the stories talk about how they were forced over and over again to pay money to move each step of the way. And if they didn't have the money, that they might be forced to do other things, as you can imagine, to pay their way to the next step. And that was, you know, folks aren't doing those things out of a choice, they're doing it out of desperation. And that they hope that this will get them to that next step. And so someone who had mentioned shame, we can now really see where there might have been so much shame in those faces of the folks going through this, because we don't know the story. We don't know what they've gone through. We don't know what they had to do to get here. And what children have witnessed along the way. For me, that story of the young man saying that, you know, someone fell off the side of the cliff and they just had to watch it happen, because if any of them tried to help, then they would have risked the same outcome. So knowing that that's something that folks have had to endure is, do I choose myself in this moment, or do I choose the person who's hurting? And what if the person who's hurting is your mother, is your sister, is your own child? What decisions would you make? And so you can imagine how all of that is going to weigh on you. It might be said in a later segment, or it might have been in one of the pieces that I chose not to, but there was a woman saying how she couldn't get the images out of her head. How she's going about her life, she's doing the things she needs to do, but she just can't stop thinking about that thing that she saw. And so we can imagine how, you know, when folks come here and we think, well, why aren't they, you know, learning English? Why aren't they, you know, going and getting jobs? Why are they, you know, they're just sitting back? This is what they're faced with, right? And we can all imagine how we might handle stressful situations, or how we have had to handle those. And what would we do if we were now in a place where we don't speak the language, we have no financial resources, we likely have no social resources, that we probably had to leave them. And so how would that exacerbate that trauma? And how would you move through that, especially if there's no support put in place to help you move through that? And we know right now that we're in a mental health crisis, that we don't have enough therapists to support folks even over the past 10 or 20 years, we haven't had that. And now we're faced with a group of folks who need to have someone who can help them through this. And primarily someone who speaks a language other than English, which is already challenging to find in the mental health world. So some of my hope in this training toward the end, when we talk about trauma-informed cares and way you can help, is that we as a community can be some of those strengths and supports to these folks, even if we are not trained on how to be a therapist. And then this is just looking at as well the resettlement. So once folks get here, there can be ongoing trauma that happens to them while they're here. Those of you who heard about the Washington Heights fire, there were at least 3 families that were not Massachusetts-born families. So thinking about the traumas that they had gone through, and then they get here, and now here's another trauma that they have to go through. And we also know that trauma looks different for everyone. So in a situation or an event that may not feel traumatic to me because of the way that I perceive it, could very well be traumatic for someone else. So discrimination and racism, underemployment. So folks who are working in jobs, I mean, we have folks coming here that are doctors, that are dentists, that are unable to use those resources and are working in factories. While that may not seem like a trauma in and of itself, when you add in, like Susan said, that piece of shame, now here's even that added on, is here I am, I came here for a better life, I'm a doctor, I perform surgery, and here I am packing boxes all day long, because that's what I can access. How does that impact that individual? The next piece is another video. There's not really any speaking in the video, but it is a heavier video. So I just want to preface that before I show it. And it's about 2 minutes. So this for me was sort of the lead in of really looking at the experience of children more in depth. So looking at a video like was just shown, for me, I was trying to find an experience of when I'm watching something, you know, yes, I can hear what people are saying, but what must it be like for a child who doesn't know what's happening around them, that they're just kind of in this one experience and then all of a sudden they're in another experience. And then how do we address that, right? And so looking more at the bottom half of this risk factor for children is, what does that separation and anxiety look like? How does that impact children? Depending on their age or their developmental stage, what impact does that have? During the migration, the harsh conditions that they're experiencing, they're cold, they're on water, maybe someone else is holding them or carrying them because that's what's needed. They're likely not getting good nutrition. Probably no, one of the protective things that some of us, especially social workers, do is this, you talk through what's going to happen, right? We do social stories. Okay, this is what's next. And, this is where you're going to go. And this is who's going to be there. Well, that's not an opportunity for these folks because they have no idea what's happening. So how do we prepare children for what they're going to experience when we don't have that capacity? And then even once they're here, this is what they've gone through. How can we expect that they're going to have this feeling of safety or security, or this is your new home? What does that mean? How do we help them to, come to terms with that? And how do we address things like the impact on their learning, the impact on their health? One thing we were seeing a lot of last year were children coming who were severely malnourished or really had some significant behavioral reactions. And I say reaction because, well, we can look at it and say this is a child with difficulties or challenges. It is likely really just a response to what's been going on. When they have lived in this unsettled experience for so long, how do we expect that they're just going to show up to school, sit down at a desk, ready to learn? That's not going to happen. We have a little guy right now that we're working with that his family had migrated here, that there was a domestic violence incident that caused them to relocate. And then the main caregiver was birthing a new child. And so this little friend has now kind of bounced around to a couple different people that he's never met before. And no one is surprised by the response, but it's a lot. And so this little guy is getting aggressive. He is reliving some traumas. He's expressing those traumas verbally. And it's a lot for folks to deal with. But I think it's almost like we should be expecting this. This is what this little guy knows, is this trauma and this, that there hasn't been almost any time in this little guy's life, between 4 and 6 years old, where things have been stable. His whole life has been losing folks, disruption of spaces. So even though someone might be saying to him, your caregiver is just having a baby, you're going back home, there's no way for him to rely on that information. And so that it's, how do we support children through that? And so I'm going to hopefully skip the line here because there's a really good film here on how to stop a trauma. So what can we do in the moment when we have a child who's going through a trauma? What can we do to try to help alleviate that? So let me see if I can get myself to that video. A little too far. Okay.
I think that delivering first aid is not just needed for the body. We need also to train people to save the soul and the mind of people who are suffering from a traumatic event.
This is Assam Dowd, a child psychiatrist, former surgeon, and a father.
I'm a brand new daddy.
4 years ago, he and his wife traveled to the Greek island of Lesbos at the height of the Syrian refugee crisis to help with a relief effort. These refugees were fleeing a brutal civil war back home, and many of them were children. It was here that Issam came to a startling realization.
Today, all the focus of the humanitarian aid delegation and efforts goes to the basics need of, body, shelter, food, and really little goes to the mental health.
In fact, PTSD among Syrian refugee children has been so severe that a new phrase was coined to describe it: human devastation syndrome.
It's not the life that I want as a doctor, as a surgeon, as a child psychiatrist to give to anyone.
Issam realized that something needed to be done, and he had to be the one to do it. This is how to stop a trauma. When our brain experiences a traumatic event, the toll it takes on our mental health can last for a very long time.
I think trauma is an experience. It's an overwhelming experience, and when this experience is shaped as bad, it can cause traumatic stress disorder and can cause depression and anxiety and violence and aggression. I think that we have this very short window of opportunity, what I call the golden hour, that we can really do the intervention before the experience can be stored and imprinted in the brain, especially for kids.
How does this work? Issam explains with a story about Omar, a young Syrian refugee.
He arrived on a boat with his family, and he was terrified. They say, "Don't worry, Omar, they are coming to film you. You are a hero across the sea." The volunteers came around him and started saying, "Oh, Omar, the superhero, let me see your muscles." And he started laughing, and he was so happy in less than 15 minutes.
By telling him he's a hero, Issam gives Omar an empowering narrative that he can tell himself for the rest of his life.
And then all these experiences and memories that he had from that event will be stored as something good. And that's it. Omar now is not suffering from PTSD. He's a superhero.
In 2015, Issam and his wife started Humanity Crew, an organization that provides mental health services for refugees in the Mediterranean.
Humanity Crew until now, since 2015, delivered 32,000 hours of mental health support to over 12,000 refugees.
The work they do underscores the vital role mental health plays in helping refugees. But unfortunately, with little funding for treatment, millions of refugees are left to grapple with their trauma on their own.
Providing these interventions is not just saving the souls and the minds of the people, but it's also the future of them and the future of the host society and the future of their homeland, because they will rebuild it.
I think we can all agree that as human beings, we deserve to see ourselves as individuals with value, as heroes of our own stories, not victims.
I give them the ability to think that they are heroes. I believe truly that they are heroes.
And for that, we believe Issam is a hero too. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to our channel, because we'd love to keep sharing these sorts of stories with you.
Had mixed feelings when I first saw that video, I have to be honest. At first I was, oh my God, that's so cute. The little guy is so cute. And wouldn't that be great if you could just do this one thing and you could change the trajectory? But then I went into my, typical social worker mind of, it's not that easy, right? He can go right from that moment into the next trauma. And so who's going to be there to catch him then? And what about the parents and all these things? But I chatted about it with someone on this call and said that was how I was feeling. And we talked a lot about narrative therapy. So anyone who has worked with individuals, a really strong tool that you use with folks throughout a variety of mental health needs and challenges is narrative therapy. And it's the idea of telling your story, being the one in charge of your story, having a say in how your story is told, how it's perceived, what the next step is, being able to change the dialogue, really empowers folks. And so who's to say that having this event with this little guy and saying, no, the helicopter's here to film you, and all these folks came out to see you because you're a hero. who's to say that that won't carry him through that next trauma? To say, you know, well, maybe this is happening because I'm a hero. Maybe all these, you know, experiences are happening and I'm, you know, the great person in the story. So I had to step back a little bit and say, okay. And even, you know, we all know, right? Anyone who has worked in looking at strengths and resiliency, you know that the power of one strong, connected individual in your life can offset a lot of those traumas, a lot of the negative influences. So who's to say that one story in a little child's mind of being the hero won't help to shape and change at least the way he retells that story to himself in the future? And then what effect will that have in terms of intergenerational trauma on his children and his grandchildren down the road when he retells his story of how he came to the next place in his life? And to have some of the framework of those coping skills so that the next time he's able to use some of those skills. So I'm going to take a pause and a breath. And Amy, I see you unmuted, which is great. I just wanted to see, where's this
Oh yeah, no, Jillian, I love that you picked that clip. I got to meet that guy. He gave a lecture at Springfield College while I was teaching there, and there was so much more to that story too. I really saw that as reframing. That kid like lost his parents. Like they came, I mean, he talks so much about just like pulling people out of the water and how many people died making that journey, and sort of the reframing of like this horrible journey that claimed the lives of your loved ones, to like, so many people gave their lives and you survived. Like, Omar, you survived. You are the child that your parents gave their lives for something better, and you survived, Omar. And like he had spent more time with this, like it really, you could feel it, like this new redefining of that experience as like, you had all this hardship, but this hardship was so that something better could come for you. And I agree with you. It's so much, it feels like so much pressure, but wow, all the bad stuff has already happened. Like there is that. Just so much of this, the heaviness of it is hard. Like where I started with like, you are a hero among us, wow, because the heavy, like just even being in this for an hour, the heaviness of it is so hard. I'm like, wow, Jillian's doing this all the time. This is incredible. But also when you've already been through so much, all the other stuff is like, like I traveled across this perilous journey and lost all of these loved ones, and now you're going to bother me with, you know, this little thing. It really puts so much in perspective of what is a real, but I guess, you know, for me, I'm just thinking about the things that feel big in my life that I'm comparing to, like, and I know in the world of trauma, we don't compare traumas, but you know, small things compared to loss of life, the sort of perilous journeys that people are going through. Like I've, not to belittle my own pain and suffering, but I have not been through anything like what people have been through. And wow, that's all I got.
It definitely, you know, there's a lot of talk, right, about how is it that some folks are able to go through the worst of the worst and they come out and they're, giving people, and they're, still able to stand on their own feet and still able to survive. And then there are other folks who maybe go through something that someone would say wasn't even really that bad, and yet they're devastated by it. And it really speaks to, I think, a lot of what are the stories we tell ourselves when we're little? What are the stories our families tell us? How do we perceive and how are we perceived? And what are the folks that are around us? What is that experience? And so I think a lot about that children who have that one healthy, safe adult, whoever that is in their life, that have an experience of, I'm going through this really horrible thing and I don't know what to do, but they're loved through it, right? They're given positive affirmations, they're given support and resources, versus the folks who are going through something that we may deem as not as bad, but they have no support, they're belittled through it, they're shamed for what they're going through. Well, it isn't even that bad. What do you mean? Other people have it worse. That contributes to an inability to overcome. And then it gets passed down through the generations. And someone in here said, bad things always happen to me. And you sort of become a self-fulfilling prophecy that if you think that everything is going to be difficult, then often you're going to perceive everything as being difficult. But if you're given the opportunity to see it as even the worst of the worst can potentially have this small piece that you're the hero in the story, then maybe even when the worst of the worst is happening, you can find a way to have resiliency and cope through that, even if it's just you that you're relying.
That was part of the story of Omar too, that I forgot. Like, that's why they were humanity crew. Everyone who was working there was like, Omar's here. Like, they all cheered for him. They all treated him like he was, like, they made sure that that kid felt like he was a rock star every place he went. And imagine if we did that for our new arrivals. Like, imagine if we, and I think about, not to get on a tangent, but I think about Vietnam era, like the harm we did, the secondary harm we did by not treating our veterans like heroes. Like, we harmed them so much because of our feelings about the war and what our government did. That wasn't those soldiers' fault, and we treated them like crap, right? Like, imagine if we treated our new arrivals like, oh my God, you came through so much and you're a hero. What a different experience they'd be having. It just, thinking about that just shows how much we really can impact their trajectory by how we behave in the environment that they've landed in.
Absolutely. And, that is part of this triple trauma paradigm, that folks can go through the worst of the worst in their country of origin, the worst of the worst through migration. But if when they resettle, they're given the positive affirmation, they're given the supports and resources they need, that can have a mitigating effect on the way that they experience it. However, when those who maybe didn't have it the worst in the country of origin, maybe didn't have it the worst during their migration here, but then are treated unwanted, there's further discrimination based on their religion or the color of their skin, their inability to speak the language, they can't get jobs, they can't get housing because of all of these impacts. Even if the first two steps were not that bad, because again, like Amy said at the beginning, anytime you're uprooted from your home, particularly against your choice, or because you have no other options, that is difficult. Even if you somehow get yourself through all of that, if you settle here, so say that little Omar came here, and then it was, no one here is treating him as the hero, no one here is, supporting him, they're shaming him, we don't want you here, go back where you came from. speak English or go home, that's going to destroy what supports he did have. And often, culturally in America, we see folks as either worthy refugees and worthy immigrants, or we see them as unworthy. And words will be put around such as, those illegals, and the illegals are the ones taking the jobs or taking the housing, which is why I really made a point to say that the majority of folks who are here, anyone who's currently placed in EA shelter or getting services at Logan Airport, are here legally. They are worthy immigrants, migrants, refugees, deserving of the same supports as any other group who has come here. They are also, unfortunately, not being given those same supports. And they are not being seen as worthy of those same supports. So even though they may be able to access things like cash assistance because they have children, food stamps, they're eligible for certain housing opportunities, they're not seen as worthy of that because generally of the way they chose to come to this country. And so part of why I really wanted to show what the experience of going through the Darien Gap was to dispel some of that myth that they chose this easy route, that they just decided one day to show up at the border and cross, and that it was this easy experience, because that's not true. These folks have gone through as much, if not more, than some of the other folks who are coming here due to the way that they came. And that trauma on these children who went through the worst of the worst and then arrive here and continue to go through the worst of the worst are going to be at a much more difficult situation. These are children who are going to have more difficulties. They are families who are going to struggle more simply because of the way that they are being perceived and the reception that they are receiving here. And so I love that saying of when you know better, you do better. So when we know more about the situation, when we understand what folks have gone through, when we can then present to these folks in a way that says, we now know more than I did yesterday, and therefore I'm going to respond now in a different way than I did yesterday, that has power. And so I don't want to move back and forth, but there is another video here of the experience of children going through the Darien Gap. I think it's really powerful. I think it's important for us to hear their experiences, like children being separated from caregivers on the path, that I think are just important for us to note as we then move into the conversation of what do we do next to give us a little bit more perspective and insight. So I'm going to show that part, and then we will move into a little more talk about the way it impacts children, and then we'll move on to the strengths and resilience.
Glo ki tan fin pran mwen avèk marim, avèk pitit, avèk bébém.
Sa mte potel non kal ga bébé nan dom, et puis l'autre là m'kembe pon yet li, lèm rive nan de l'eau a fort, m'baka marcher nan de l'eau ensemble avec, m'pa vle pour de l'eau a prendre nan même.
Algunas veces por las condiciones del clima, la crecida de los ríos o que los padres quedan heridos, muchas veces tienen que delegar a otros adultos el cuidado de los niños pequeños, quienes avanzan 1 o 2 días adelante durante la travesía en Darien. Tienen que separarse de sus hijos con tal de que ellos sobrevivan.
Bon, pour bien dire, si m'de konte kon sa voyage la te, moi-même m'pa ta fait pas quoi. Pas monter mon sous déplacement, que côté va passer, si puis au chapé bon va gen la vie.
Qui pas vraiment facile pour moi. Moi malade, pied me décalé dans route là. Malade, moi m'a vomi, m'a diarrhée, en bas m'a fait mal. Petite moi c'est un ami qui prend l'autre, il 2 petites, c'est un ami qui prend l'autre petite là. Petite film nan même, c'est un ami qui prend qui aide me porter.
Bah les gon patnek vinn passer seul, lui même seul, et puis me relé, me dit est-ce qu'on ka aider ma petit moun nan? Me dit s'il vous plaît passer de l'eau pour moi, et puis vraiment relé pour qu'on y aller ensemble avec moi. Et puis
Al llegar a las estaciones de recepción migratoria, son identificados por Senafrón y Migración, quienes remiten a la entidad de protección del Estado. Allí entonces la entidad de protección remite a la casita, a Aldeas SOS, que es nuestro socio implementador, donde los niños son ubicados para ser cuidados de manera temporal.
Bon, le yo di ni nan lot la, nte gen espoir m'ta jwenni parce que ça fait me gen espoir m'ta jwenni depuis qu'on bay passeport. Le dia ça naika.
Moi vinn rencontrer avec Panama dans UNICEF, moi vinn rencontrer avec petite ça.
Bon, m tellement content le moi la venir ça permet de l'eau sortir dans yeux. Bon, m'da remen pile bagay pour yo. C'est ça qui fait moi même besoin de côté
pour lever, pour m'a travail, pour me prendre soin yo.
Parce que pas tout le temps m'a fait ensemble avec yo pour m'aider.
There were many stories in a lot of these videos of folks who got separated either from their own family members or someone who offered to help carry one of their children. And for days they were separated. They didn't know if they would see them again. They didn't know what had happened to them. There was one where they were walking until, they couldn't walk anymore. They woke up the next morning. The mom is saying how she doesn't know how she can go on. Her feet were so swollen and in pain. And yet she got up and she's carrying a little one on her back or her shoulders, and they're pushing forward with just this hope that she would find her child. And the feeling in my chest of not knowing and being there with them as much as you could through the videos. And in that experience, she did find her little girl, and it was her brother. And they went on to say that even once they got to America, they moved in with an uncle, and they followed them like a year or two later, and the little girl still would not separate from her mom. Anytime the mom was leaving, it was, "Where are you going? I don't want you to leave." So thinking about what that experience is like, and then the story I said earlier of this little boy whose caregiver is away from him right now and he's moving houses back and forth, how can he trust that he's going to see her again? Yes, he can have that experience once that he found her, but what's to say that will be the outcome the next time? And what do we think the experience and the reaction of that child is going to be, even while they're right now in that trauma? And how do we support him? So things like changes to their sleep habits, crying too much, being very clingy to a caregiver, withdrawing or having anger and aggression, feelings of anxiety. There were lots of stories where the children, anytime the caregiver wasn't there, were afraid that they had died every time, over and over again, even if they could hear them sleeping in the other room or, could physically see them. It was still just that not knowing. Those who are living in experiences where they have an undocumented caregiver, there's often a lot of fear and anxiety around that. Those of you who lived locally, it was during the Trump administration. I remember having a large conversation in early intervention around what do you do if ICE shows up while you're in a home visit with a family? What do you need to do? What are your rights? And imagining that you're in that moment, right? That you're not sure what's going to happen for that 1 hour a week. But what about for these children who are living that day in and day out? They go to sleep, they don't know what's going to happen when they're sleeping. So you can start to sort of imagine what that would be like when you're 3, 4, 5 years old. And that's the, family life that you grow up with. And then we know, of course, that anytime there are changes in the political situation, everyone is well aware that we're coming into a election year. Even those who can't be involved in that process, they are very aware, they are very afraid, and that's that's a viable fear. That's not just, you know, oh, we don't like who's in office. It's we don't know what's going to happen to us in the event that there is a big change, and therefore there is a change to immigration status. There's a change to the court system. It's a very real and very palpable fear among undocumented folks, as well as those who are currently under TPS, because at any moment they know that that can change. So now into sort of the strengths and what we can do. So some of the strengths of refugees and migrants are that they have the capacity to rebuild supportive communities. I was just listening today to NPR where they were talking about folks within the LGBTQ community and how they tend to settle into areas with one another so that there's safety and there's community. And that is something that we see a lot of times too, that there are certain areas of the country where there's more of one cultural group. And that's not because, you know, they happen to like winters in Massachusetts. I don't think anyone, maybe me, but loves winters in Massachusetts. But it's because they have family here, they have friends here, there's strong religious ties here. Someone was telling me that the country that they come from, they actually chose Worcester because there's a faith leader here from that religious sect that has created this community here. And it's known in their country of origin as well as here that Worcester, and there's one other place in the Midwest, are the two places that you go if you're from this religious sect, because that's where you're going to find community. One of the strengths is that they sustain their cultural and religious beliefs, that they have strong family cohesion. If this is all you have are these three family members, you're going to generally have cohesion. Obviously, there are some pieces to that. Our teenagers like to cause a little bit of hiccups to that, but still they have a lot of loyalty and cohesion still. There's a lot of ethnic pride. There's a lot of drive to succeed, as well as something that's called immigrant optimism. So the ongoing hope that things can get better. And that's really where I pulled from that chasing the American dream, that even if things are hard right now, even if things are not going the way that you expect or are much harder than you expect, there's still this hope that it gets better. There's still a hope that somehow either you can change the trajectory and make it better, or that it will somehow naturally on its own get better. There was one of the videos that I watched where there were a lot of strong misconceptions around what life was going to be like when they came to America. I had a little girl that I worked with from Ecuador who was like, I thought there was, you know, McDonald's on every corner, and that you didn't even, you know, you just show up and they just give you cheeseburgers, because that was what she saw. That everyone lives in these big houses with lots of cars, because that's what they saw in the movies. And then they get here and that's not, there's probably a McDonald's on every corner, but they're not, otherwise the experiences that they saw in the movies, or, you know, they were told where they were coming from, especially as refugees, you know, you're going to get there and they're going to support you and you're going to get health care and they're going to give you money and everything is going to be okay. And then they come and the resettlement process is that they'll support you for about 3 months. And then really the expectation is that you're now on your own. And so there isn't a lot of preparation for what that looks like. And there, because, you know, like Amy was saying at the beginning, a lot of times these are the areas that get cut the most due to bias, due to structural racism, due to systemic oppression. These tend to be the areas where the funding is usually cut first. So we're trying to do more with less. And it's no wonder that that is then going to impact the trauma response of folks when they are now finding themselves in the next level of trauma of not being able to get enough food, not being able to afford healthcare, access to healthcare, transportation, all of those things. I just love this little guy's face. I just thought he was so cute. And, you know, this is a photo of a little guy that's in a refugee camp. And, you know, when you see the images of refugee camps, that's not somewhere that you expect there to be children's laughter and joy. And yet you see these little friends that are playing soccer together and, you know, are being, learning, wanting to learn, wanting to educate themselves, even when those systems aren't there. So some protective factors are the supports and opportunities that promote healthy behaviors, and they are more predictive of adjustment than risk factors. So say that again. Protective factors are more predictive of adjustment than any risk factors. So the more we can do, which is why that story of Omar shows how that works, because that one experience that he has of this really positive, really strong, you did this, you're the hero, the hope is that that's going to outweigh it. And the research shows that, risk factors predict negative outcomes in 20 to 49% of a high-risk population, while the protective factors predict positive outcomes in 50 to 80% of a high-risk population. So showing that the more protective factors we can put in, or the stronger those protective factors are, the more likely it is that a population that's at high risk is going to come out of it in a better position than those with risk factors. That's a really strong number. And that really goes to show that, especially as families are first coming here, the response that they get and the ability to have that reception into America be positive is going to impact the outcome of their resettlement here. This video, so we're starting now to look into what are the things we can do. So this video is talking about art therapy as a way to kind of heal trauma. I don't know that anyone from WARM is on the call, but this summer they're doing some art therapy with refugee teenagers. And I'm just so excited about that for them and for these teens, because I know how strong that is. So as strong as narrative therapy and telling your story is, so is being able to express yourself and to work through that trauma. So I'll go ahead and show this video now about this. And I believe this was from a resettlement in Africa.
Uganda has been credited for its open door policy towards refugees, but as they trickle into the settlements, the burden now shifts to providing basic services for them, which include education, healthcare, and most importantly, rehabilitation. This is Bidibidi Refugee Settlement in Yumbe District, northwest of Uganda. Many of the refugees here are from South Sudan. The 2013 civil strife is believed to have displaced close to 4 million people and caused the deaths of another 400,000. More than half of the displaced South Sudanese have since found solace here in Bidibidi settlement. The miles of homes here have since transformed to semi-permanent structures. Figures from the Prime Minister's office show that some 250,000 refugees are living in the settlement. Water, health facilities, schools and other basic needs have been provided. But the UNHCR is now working to help young refugees move on from their past through art therapy initiatives. Here at Twajiji Primary School, teachers and pupils were trained on how to use art therapy. This is to encourage them to speak openly about traumatic experiences, use art to express their feelings and to overcome stress, and learn how to become better artists.
As you can see, there are two heads there. We wrote that one, that we drew that one, that those are our leaders. They should come together and bring peace in our land, South Sudan.
Like this, which is showing togetherness, peace, and eating together. Let us be united. Let us share our words as one community.
But To Joan Bayo, a primary 7 pupil here, the drawings are much more than art.
We used to revise these things from the book, but this time you revise from the book and the summary will be done just outside. You look at the wall, then you look at the pictures, the parts are there. From there it will be simple for us to revise.
As an elephant drawn for us here in Tragedy Primary School, for me as a teacher it will help me, because when I'll be teaching about an elephant, these children will see it.
The young ones work with the adults, and this is why.
Before we started painting, we sat down and looked at what ideas we can put in place. We looked at family relations, families sitting together, doing a number of things. We looked at children playing, people getting water from the same points. Those are things that can bring people together. They will have to learn a lesson that it is important that as they're here in Uganda as refugees, they can as well live together, forget their differences in South Sudan.
With the uncertainty on when they will return to their country, the children also carry special messages for their leaders.
Let us be together as one blood of the Lord Jesus Christ that you have created for us. Let us be together, let's be united. Because our country is there, let us be united. When they are hating themselves there, let us be united in the settlement.
I want them to come together. They should not separate themselves. They should come together. They should think of our children, our future generation. They should think about it, because now our future, we don't know. We have lost our way.
The United Nations works with professional artists to help the children express themselves through art and paintings.
There needs to be arts components that are made with every single crisis that exists. Children need to have the opportunity, no matter where they are, no matter what crisis and trauma they have been through. These children have been through such serious trauma. You can see it in their behavior. You can see it in the way they interact. And these children need to have healthy ways of expressing themselves. They need to have healthy ways to let out what they've been through, ways of idealizing their future, of believing what is possible, and they need to be able to do that on an ongoing basis. And they need to know that it is possible.
Whether it's paintings, sculptures, or drawings, refugees around the globe are finding their purpose in this world and potential in themselves to reach new heights despite what they have endured.
And when we go back, we shall have that knowledge of painting, that knowledge of sharing. We shall forget about the war.
When we go back to South Sudan, I'll be able to train people how to paint, how to mix different colors of paints, and so on.
This is with the hope to give a voice against their dark experiences that is positive, uplifting, and inspirational. Walter Mwesije, NTV.
I like that video for a few reasons. One, who doesn't love watching kids make art? I think that it's one of the biggest joys. And I was able to see, so last week when we had the fires at Washington Heights, the folks were at the shelter, and one of the items that were brought were crayons and coloring books and paper. And there were just art supplies strewn on the floor and a whole bunch of kids laying on their bellies, drawing pictures, and there were adults sitting with them doing the same thing. And so we think about what is therapeutic for children, but also grounding for the adults that are with them. And there were some toys there. There was a TV in the other room, but where were all these kids? On the floor, coloring, drawing, making art. And often with their caregivers, either nearby or doing it with them. And it was grounding for the caregivers too. Some of them were drawing things that they had seen, but some of them were just drawing. We're just making art. We're just going through that process. And I think that it's also speaks to, that's something that those of us who want to be supportive, but maybe aren't sure how, or don't know what to do, can always show up and do. You can sit and make art with someone, and it's just as valuable with an adult it is as with a child. It can open the door to a conversation. You can put yourself at their level by doing the art with them. I think anytime that youth, especially when they want to talk, sitting and making eye contact, like traditional, say, talk therapy, is not the way to go. But if they're doing art next to you, or they're playing soccer with you or basketball, they might be more likely to start to share and to feel comfortable that you're on that same level with them. So I really appreciated some of that. And I like that. I see pride. And what I love too was that last segment where she was saying, now I can go do this with others. Now I can teach someone else how to do this. And so we know that as there may be other traumas in their life, or they may have their children that are going through traumas, they're developing some skills. They're developing coping strategies and ways that they can mitigate that stress, mitigate that trauma, and teach it to others. So the next part of this is talking about sort of what are the principles of trauma-informed care and how do we implement them as a community. So there are sort of 6 key principles. One of them is safety, which can mean a variety of things. So using professional interpreters. We want to ensure that the message that we're saying is being interpreted correctly. And one way that we do that is ensuring that the person who's translating the message is doing it at a level that shows the value of what we're saying. We don't want to use youth as interpreters for a whole host of issues that include re-traumatization. We should not be looking to youth as the sort of leader in the family, the go-between. We shouldn't be putting that burden on children. Now, obviously, if it's, hey, can you go tell your mom I'm here? That's a very different interpretation need than sitting that youth down. And that includes teenagers. We should not be expecting 16 and 17-year-old children to be responsible for having those conversations with parents. We want to empower them that if they want to participate in conversations that impact the family, that we find ways to do that, but we should not be leaning to them as the go-betweens. We also, such a simple thing, but it's so powerful, is ensuring that you're sitting at the level with the family. So if they're sitting on the floor, that we join them there. If they're sitting in chairs around a table and they invite you to sit at the chair around the table, that you do so with them. That's creating that sense of, I'm here with you, I'm here at your level, I'm not above you, that I'm joining in this with you. Another piece that I think is one of the most important is trustworthiness and transparency. So sharing information about what's happening, not attempting to shield people from what's going to happen because you're afraid of how they may perceive that or what it's going to do. You may need to be really mindful about the way that you share the information, but that we should always trust that people are worthy and capable, and that we should be sharing with that mindset. That you should always follow through with what you say. If you say, I'm going to bring you this, or I'm going to get this information, or I'm going to do this, that you then do that. If you're not sure that you can commit to doing that, then it's best just to not say it. Because my favorite phrase from the Afghans, the Haitians, they all use it is, I'm waiting for you. And I always thought, oh my goodness, that's so much pressure. But I shouldn't say, I'll come visit you unless I'm going to come visit you, because then they're waiting for me. And many a time that I have, because we're going to make mistakes, that I have said, yes, I'll come as soon as I can. And then they see me again was, I've been waiting for you and you're not coming. And the best thing you can do then is to be humble and to address it and acknowledge it versus to, shoo it away. In terms with that is, don't give information unless you know it's accurate. So if you aren't sure of the answer, it's best to say, I'm not sure, I'll find out, or I'll try to find out that information, than to just try to give some information to placate the situation. And along all of that is also those false promises. So someone who's just arriving that's been through a trauma, we don't want to say you're safe now, because we don't know what the next day holds for them. We also don't know what their perception is. And therefore what to us looks like safety may not look like safety to them. As well as being sure that we say things like that will never happen again. We also want to show respect in our care and join in mutual collaboration with them. So again, using appropriate language, checking with them that they understand that what you're saying is valid for them, considering their developmental stages as well as current abilities. Someone had once said, and I really should do research on this because I use this all the time, that when someone is in the middle of trauma or crisis, a child is in the middle of a tantrum, their IQ actually drops because they're in this trauma right then and there that they're not able to process it. So that is not the time to have these in-depth conversations or expect that they're going to retain information. I think of that too, that when our newly arrived families come and they're getting settled, one of the things resettlement agencies do is they go and provide cultural orientation within 24 hours. While that's great to some degree that you go meet with them and you provide some information, you have to understand that it is very unlikely that they're absorbing almost any of that. One of the videos that I was watching, this gentleman was driving the Syrian family to their new home. And he said, you're going to get a lot of information, but the only thing I'm going to focus on right now is helping you know what city you're in right now. You're in Philadelphia. Say the word. Where are you? You're in Philadelphia. And that was really a grounding piece, right? This is where you are now. This is all you need to worry about today, is that this is where you are and you're here and I'm here, and whatever happens next, we'll deal with that when it comes. The other three principles to round it out are empowerment. So again, creating that collaborative environment where their autonomy is paramount, that they are, you know, the leader of the story, that they are, you know, just like back to Omar, he's the hero of that story. That you're creating an environment where you foster that collaboration. I'm not here telling you what you should and shouldn't do. I'm not here telling you how you should and shouldn't react or behave or interpret this. I'm here and I'm saying, these are your choices and what would you like to do next? And giving them back that power, empowering them to, you know, be in control of the narrative of their story. Focusing on their voice, educating yourself on what are appropriate cultural expressions. Do I take my shoes off? Do I not take my shoes off? Do I make eye contact? Do I not make eye contact? And always asking them. There are some families that want you to do it because that is valid for their family, regardless of what the cultural norms that you might know are for them. And then always amplifying the voices of those that we're working with as well as their needs. That sort of, in a nutshell, is my job here with the Office of New Americans, is really amplifying the voices of those New Americans who are underserved and showing what the needs are, but also acknowledging the strengths and bringing those to the forefront to look at what is the value that is being brought to our country by our New Americans. And then always giving choice, respecting cultural norms, respecting parenting decisions, unless of course it puts a child in imminent harm's way. But if a parent says that, you know, this is how I want to raise my child, that may not necessarily be in line with how we perceive things in America, but isn't causing imminent harm, we need to respect those parents. It's valuable to give them information about what some of the cultural norms of America are, but not saying you must now be this, you must now do this. Asking them permission and allowing time. Every family is going to adjust in their own time. They're going to move through traumas in their own time. They're going to heal from traumas in their own time. And so we really have to look to them as being the experts of their own life and providing that support. And these are all things that any of us can do when we're working with new arrivals. You don't need to have a certain degree to do this. You don't need to have you know, certain skill sets. We can all trust that the new American that's in front of us right now knows the best thing for them, and that we're just there to provide the support, maybe a little bit of education, but that, you know, they ultimately know what it is that they need. The last thing I have here is this little poem that I found that I thought was really powerful. Now the question is whether it wants to show up on here. So it looks like right now you guys are just seeing a white screen.
We are just seeing a white screen.
All right. Well, I'm just going to read it then, because I'm not sure how to make it show up. And it will be linked in the resources that go out, and hopefully when you see the slides. So it's titled We Matter, and it's from the UCLA Dream Resource Center. And it's a poem by Sarah Alaga, who was an immigrant justice fellow. So again, it's titled We Matter. You have crossed seas, mountains, and oceans. You came to a place you never imagined you would be. You brought with you the strength of a hurricane, and you carry with you the weight of the world on your shoulders. I see all of your hopes, dreams, and struggles. I know the way you feel about being in a place so foreign, for I have felt this way before too. The feeling that we don't belong haunts us every now and then. Hang on, because I have to get to a different screen to finish telling you the story. Let me stop sharing real quick so that I can. I'm so sorry. It was like so in the. Home has become such a faraway place. We wonder when we will be able to smell the jasmine trees again and hear the sound of the adhan coming from the mosque and visit our friends and family over a strong cup of Arabic coffee. Little do you know that when I speak with you, I get a little taste of home. We speak as if we've known each other for generations. The familiarity comforts us both in a way that we have been longing for. You give me the hope that is not lost in our community. Your kindness inspires me. Your gratitude fills me with so much hope and love. It makes me feel that I matter. It makes me feel that we matter. Oh, and now it's probably showing it to you. Can you see it now? Yes. It has lovely artwork too, with the mosque here and the trees and the flowers.
It is beautiful.
It has this little graphic at the end here, which I just love. I thought that was really great.
It's beautiful.
So that was all I had. My last slide was just a thank you slide that had my contact information on it. And then the resources, which we will send out. So
Jillian, that was so awesome. Thank you so much. Outstanding coverage of an incredibly difficult topic. Oh, look, there's hearts and claps. We do have a few minutes if people have comments, questions, things that stood out. One thing that I love that you talked about was the and I know it's probably a struggle still, the translation piece. I personally know lots of people that were in the position of translating for their parents as children, and it was harmful, absolutely harmful. I also know people that still have to translate. There's just not the level of resources we need. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that, or if you know of resources people can use. It does feel like I thought it was, you know, everyone had the right to have things translated, but I know that that's not the case everywhere you go, only for medical appointment. I don't know. What do you know about that, Jill?
I know that it's a real issue. finding funding for interpreters is really challenging. One model that works really well is having community health workers available who are able to, sometimes they're part of the community already, which, you know, has its positives, as well as you also have to be mindful that we're not causing trauma to that individual or expecting them to go outside, you know, what's comfortable for them in their community. We have used a lot of cultural brokers was the word that we used, which I had mixed feelings about. But it was taking people who are, you know, sort of already experts in the community, and then really working to find ways to compensate them for their work. And that may not always be money. There might be other ways that we can compensate people for the work that they do that doesn't require the exchanging of money. Often it is because we want to value the work that they do. But if there are other things, food, clothing, there are other things that folks need that they're just as happy to receive as direct funds. But again, it's about the choice, the empowerment, and having the conversation with them. So I have some individuals who work with me, and the compensation that we use is that they're able to get first choice of items. They can always come and get diapers whenever they need it. They can get clothes whenever they need it. And for them, that has offset the time they spend volunteering with us at the donation center. I was able to compensate them for a period of time, and I told them, you know, I'm so sorry, I can't do that anymore. I totally understand. You definitely don't need to do this. And they were like, no, we like doing it. We enjoy doing it. It gives us that feeling of giving back in a way that we can't otherwise do right now. So please, can we keep doing it? And so again, it's about not making assumptions and valuing their choices and what works for them. I think that we really need to continue to advocate that interpretation is an important part of all aspects, and that we also educate our new arrivals on what their rights are. They have a right to an interpreter when they go to court. They have a right to an interpreter based on any educational process. So when they're having meetings at the school, when they're going through IEP process, early intervention process, they have a right to an interpreter, as well as to have the documents that they're being given translated into their language. Then it's on us who are impacted by the you know, impact of that to advocate and to say to our legislatures that they need to advocate for funding to the legal system, to the school system, to offset the cost of this. It should not be that we then just tell new Americans, so sorry, there's no funding for that, we can't do that for you. But that we find ways to kind of meet those needs. I'm seeing here that Jenna says their public health nurses are trying out a piece of tech called Pocket Talk. One thing that I was able to purchase with some funds that we have are these things called Translate Live. And so it's this dual-sided tablet. So on one side, it's like the host tablet, and then the other side, it's the guest tablet. And it's in a large number of languages, including Pashto, as verbal. So they don't have to type, they can just talk in their language. And it uses AI technology to improve. So unlike Google that just word for word interprets, it contextually interprets. I don't think Alex is on the call anymore, but he tried it with me, and it did not like the word that he was using, and instead put out a not very nice word. And he's like, I promise that wasn't the word that I said. So sometimes it is a little finicky, but it's over time with use, it improves on itself. So it's really just using it as much as you can. So it's called Isla, and it's this Translate Live. They will book, I'll add that to our resources. They will book a time with you to show you how it works. I'm also happy, anyone who is working with new Americans, if you want me to come and bring this with me and we can trial it with someone, I'm happy to do that. It does require an internet connection, which has been a little bit of the challenge, and it requires sort of quiet around it, which is a bit of a challenge. So if you're one-on-one with someone, it's going to be great. But when I've been at like our donation center and I'm trying to talk and there's 100 other voices, it really struggles to hear it. It also has capacity through a QR code where someone can log in on their device and they can talk or text into the web-based option on their phone and it will talk to me. I tried that out with an Arabic speaking staff and it worked really well. It also has the option to, if I was doing this training, people could log in and they would hear what I'm saying in their languages on their device with sort of any number of folks. That is a subscription-based service, but the first like year or something was free of it. So it does have a lot of options. And I guess this is what the military uses, which is how I found out about it. I thought I saw Ping. Oh, Ping is on here. Ping is the one that told me about this. She said that this is what the National Guard was using. And so I tried to download it as an app on my phone. Wasn't the best for what I needed, but I love having the capacity that if someone isn't with me, they can just scan this QR code and we can have a conversation while I'm here in my office and they're at the hotel, they're at their home, wherever it may be. And it's almost like having a phone call. So it works pretty, not too shabby for basic stuff. I would not use it for, to tell someone about a diagnosis or treatment. But if it's like, I'm trying to schedule an appointment with you, I think that this could be a really good cost saver. It was $2,499 for the unit with the all the apps and equipment on it. The training, you can get training from them anytime that you want. And I think it's good for the first 2 years. And then after that, it's like a $300 or $400 a year subscription. So we'll see in 2 years whether
they should give you like a free subscription for life because you're such a good advertiser for it. Like but that sounds great. And that like, if people can use that, anything that makes the language barrier not a barrier is super helpful. And thanks for sharing that. We'll put all the, the landing page for each training has links to resources. So anything Jillian gives me, I'll put on there. Jillian, do you have an event coming up on Thursday and some other thing, anything you want to plug in the last few minutes, as well as if anybody has questions, jump on in. But I know you've got some stuff going on.
So Thursday morning at 6 Institute Road, which is the WAM's work building. CMHA is also there from 9 to 10:30. We're going to have a panel with some refugees, new Americans that want to share their stories. And then there's also going to be a few folks from this community that will be there to answer questions, to share information. So Amy, who it looks like hopped off, Amy Mitchell, who does a lot with our refugees, Alex Maradian, who is an immigration lawyer, myself, of course, who doesn't want to come see me, will all be there Thursday morning. And then in the afternoon, we're doing sort of a more in-depth viewing of a film about the migration through the Darien Gap, and then sort of a in-person conversation after. And then at noon, I gotta finish getting that information out. Central West Justice is going to do a virtual training about immigration and immigrant rights. So those are all World Refugee Day events that we're doing on Thursday. And then the resettlement agencies are doing a World Refugee Day, but I think I just saw something pop in my email that because of the heat advisory, they're rescheduling it. So we'll get that information out once we hear. The room that we'll be in Thursday morning is air conditioned. So you are safe to come. It's also air conditioned in the afternoon. We had to readjust our plan, but there will be air conditioning and snacks and drinks. So if anyone is able to come join us in person at either 9 or 3.
They're holding the Worcester Together meeting at that, right? That's also the Worcester Together meeting. So if people attend that, it's all the more reason to be there on Thursday.
And you all can always reach out. My contact information will get shared out. So if you have other questions or you want a training for your staff or anything, I'd be more than happy to do that. Obviously this was recorded, so you're welcome to share that out with folks. But the more we can educate the community about this and create a welcoming space for new arrivals will be the better for all of us. So information should be shared.
Thank you so much, Jillian. It was wonderful. I so appreciate too that your background in early childhood was really another layer that just adds even more to this topic. We know that many of our new arrivals have already had there's children, like there are like new babies in the mix, and what that means for these kids, and it's an important perspective to add. Anyone have comments or questions? It looked like there were lots of people in the audience that are really in position to help this population and to get this information out in ways that are going to be useful. So I'm super grateful, Jillian, that you took the time to put together such an impactful presentation. Kelsey, Susan, anyone else?
And thank you all for coming. Like Amy said, making time in your day for this, we know is challenging. And so I really appreciate you all being committed to this conversation and hearing these stories.
Millie, we'll share every single thing that Jillian shares at worcesterax.org, and there's this landing page for all the Trauma Training Tuesdays, and she'll have her own page, and everything will be linked right there. And they are designed so that if you are working with somebody or whatever the topic is, you can just have a one-stop for a bunch of resources on that topic. We really do this to be of benefit to the community, and that's the intention. So we really hope that it gets used that way so people can find the information they need in a way that is centering lived experience, that's empathetic, science-based, all the things that really make for good practice.
This was great. I can't figure out how to raise my hand. I don't know. But this was awesome. Thank you, Jillian and Amy and Kelsey. And Jillian, I just want to say that I noticed a couple of times you said, sure how I feel about this, or yeah, I not sure I liked this the first time I saw it. I love the fact that I think the worst thing we can do is pretend that we have all the answers and there's only one way to do things. And it's so refreshing to hear, someone just say, yeah, I don't know how I feel about this. It's great. I appreciate it.
Thanks. It's always one of the things, right, is to be self-reflective and to know we don't have all the answers, and to acknowledge that because all these videos I watched at least once, sometimes twice, and then a third time today when I showed it. And sometimes my feelings changed a little bit as I was watching it. Certainly there were none where I thought, oh, this is great. And then I watched it and thought, oh, I shouldn't have shown this today. It was more, oh, I wasn't sure how I felt. And then it was like, no, I think I'm glad I showed it, even if it was maybe really hard or showed a little bit more than I wanted. I tried to be really mindful of picking items that had that impact without really being over the top. I think anyone can Google those and find those if they so choose. But it's really important too that we be reflective and that we're always thinking, I said this thing and was that what I should have said? And it's always okay to go back to situations and say, I said this and I've realized that wasn't the best thing, or I've said this and I realize I'm so sorry, and to be humble about that, because that's how we learn. And that's, how we, again, continue to mitigate trauma, right? Is by working through it and acknowledging when mistakes are made, or when we're just not sure, and being vulnerable.
And
so
you're modeling that trustworthiness and transparency, and Susan called
always
it out.
transparency.
I appreciate that. Yes, much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Happy World Refugee Day this week, everyone. Thank you, Jillian. You really did it justice.
Thanks, Amy.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Have a great afternoon, everyone.
Take good care. Yay. Bye.